Welcome back to GH Updates, your go-to spot for all the drama, revelations, and explosive secrets from General Hospital. Buckle up, because the episode airing on Monday, June 2nd, 2025, is nothing short of a seismic shakeup in Port Charles. Let's break it all down. The courtroom brimmed with restrained hostility as the divorce and custody trial between Michael and Willow began. No longer just a legal proceeding, but a stage where heartbreak, resentment, and unresolved revenge collided under oath. Composed but visibly burdened, flanked by Diane, a powerhouse attorney known for her sharp logic and methodical approach, with a voice as precise as her strategy. Diane opened with a series of calm, piercing arguments that underscored Michael's role. As a devoted father, Hohad provided both stability and safety during turbulent times. She presented carefully curated evidence, school attendance reports, emotional assessments from chilled psychologists, and testimonials about Michael's presence and discipline. Her portrait was clear. Michael was the steady hand, the structured protector, the only viable choice for primary custody of Way and Amelia. Yet across the aisle stood Rick, a seasoned and cunning legal tactician whose calm demeanor belied his reputation for exploiting weakness with ruthless pressure. Rick offered no outright tributations of Michael's love for his children. Instead, he subtly reframed it as controlling, rigid, and conditional. He cast Willow not as a victim, but as a resilient, nurturing mother who had served emotional alienation, quietly shouldering the pain while never faltering in her devotion. Rick introduced emotional documentation, therapy transcripts, videos of Willow's bedtime routines with the children, even hand-drawn cards from Amelia. They expressed a child's pure and unfiltered love. He told the court this wasn't just about who could provide more, but Abutu provided better emotionally, intuitively, selflessly. His words slithered into theorem like a shadow, quietly suggesting that Michael's power and influence were not safeguards, but weapons. As Thurbands intensified, Sasha became a non-willing centerpiece. She was called not to testify against either party, but to serve as a witness to the emotional realities inside that broken household. Yet, Rick, never oneto waste an opportunity, turned her presence in a psychological leverage. He alluded to Sasha's past mental health crisis, her struggles with grief, and insinuated her alliance with Michael was tainted by emotional dependency rather than sound judgment. Diane objected repeatedly, but Rick's insinuations had already done the damage. Sasha's presence visibly rattled both sides. She was no longer neutral, but collateral, a woman torn between loyalty and survival, made to relive her trauma in a room that cared more about leverage than healing. Her silence, tremors, and stammered phrases became tools for narrative control. Meanwhile, the courtroom tethered between emotional implosion and legal rigor. The judge maintained a stern and deliberate pace, but the expressions oft jury and onlookers betrayed through it what they were witnessing. Michael's composure began to erode as Rick dug deeper into his past missteps, periods of absence, choices made in anger, moments where control overtook compassion. Willow, once hesitant and visibly fatigued, found steel in her spine. When Rick invoked the night she nearly left Port Charles for good, he painted it not as abandonment, but as her last stand for sanity. Both parents were no longer just defending custody. They were defending Thursteen. Every testimony, every visual aid, every glare from across their room chipped away at the remnants of the marriage that once was. The tension was not only about legal custody, but a bootmarrow-worthiness. As the day waned and thefanal arguments approached, the courtroom fell under an eerie stillness. Diane's closing statement was a masterclass in restraint. Factual, firm, and focused entirely on the children's need for consistency, discipline, and safety. She did not tear down Willow, but rather elevated Michael's ability to lead his children into a future unforgettable emotional chaos. Then Rick rose, and instead of delivering a venomous finale, he softened his tone, portraying Willow as a mother clinging to the last sacred bond she had not yet lost. His words carried sorrow, subtle anger, and calculated labor. When silence reclaimed the courtroom, it was no longer just a legal battle that had unfolded. But Adavastini reclined for a family now scattered, leaving behind only the hope, thought. The court's decision, whatever it may be, would serve the interests of the only innocents in the room, Way and Amelia. Second, Jordan began Haran's investigation quietly under the guy's offer role as Sidwell's personal secretary. It started innocently enough, organizing documents, managing schedules, and processing grant paperwork. But as she delved deeper into their chords, she noticed an unusual patterns surrounding a name that kept reappearing. Dalton, a renowned biology professor with a reputation for groundbreaking but highly secret endeavors. What struck Jordan wasn't just frequency of his name, but the discreet flow of funds directed toward his projects. Funds that bypassed normal academic oversight. The deeper she looked, the more inconsistencies she found. Missing reports, blocked. Access to certain files and encrypted immunics that Sidwell seemed to prioritize above all else. Her curiosity turned to suspicion as she realized Dalton wasn't simply conducting advanced risk. He was protecting something, and everyone around him seems a detriment to help keep it hidden. Intrigued and increasingly unsettled, Jordan began researching Dalton's work beyond what was publicly available. She discovered that his field wasn't just animal behavior as he claimed. It had shifted toward synthetic biology and genetic manipulation, with particular focus on cross-species gene integration. Reports suggested that Dalton was experimenting with genetic material that could fundamentally alter the way organisms responded to stimuli, even hinting at methods of neurological reprogramming. These weren't simple academic exercises, they were high-stakes experiments with proof found template. Dalton had gone off the academic grid, refusing to publish his results and distancing himself from peer reviews. Jordan soon realized that his research wasn't being hidden because it was incomplete. It was being hidden back out. It was dangerous and possibly unethical. Her investigation led her to a secret facility, one not listed in any university directory or financial ledger, located on the outskirts of town under Adama Corporation. Jordan, using her access to Sidwell's security credentials, managed to obtain internal files and surveillance logs. What she found was chilling genetical metadata. Animals with abnormal brain activity subjected to intense behavioral condition. Some experiments involved implanting synthetic neural networks into primates, while others tested DNA sequences designed to suppress fear and pain responses in large predators. That facility kept no formal records of failures or casualties, but hidden folders revealed footage of violent outbursts, failed content, and subjects that exhibit a threat far beyond normal biological operators. The creatures were no longer animals. In the traditional sense, they were something new, some thingent. It was then that Jordan stumbled upon a confidential documented ELD successor protocol, a detailed roadmap for transferring the research and its applications to a shadowy organization. This group, cloaked in international funding fronts and obscure galantes, planned to commercialize the technology, possibly for military or surveillance use. The document listed regions with high political instabilities testing zones, specifically naming villages where population loss would be overlooked or dismissed. Accompanying mails signed only with cryptic initials like VLANDC12A revealed an upcoming phase live field trials involving weaponized biological specimens. Dalton, far from being alone, eccentric, was a willing architect of something monstrous. And Sidwell was the gatekeeper facilitating it all behind polished veneer of academia. Realizing the enormity of what had uncovered, Jordan's fear became a visceral. She began receiving anonymous messages, some gibberish, others containing veiled threats. One day she found a photo of herself entering her apartment, taken from a distance. Her paranoia sharpened into survival instinct. She changed her routines, encrypted her devices, and installed cameras in her home. She could no longer trust anyone, not even the institution she worked for. But she knew one thing for certain. What Dalton had created was no longer just a theoretical danger. It was real. It was active. And it was on the verge of being unleashed. Jordan was no longer just an observer. She was the only person who could expose the truth, even if it meant becoming the target of those who would kill to keep it buried. Third, Sonny sat in the quiet corner of his dimly lit living room, their glass of bourbon in his hand untouched, his eyes fixed on the shadows cast by the setting sun. The weight on his shoulders was heavier than usual, and for once he didn't try to hide it. Jason, ever present in moments like these, stood nearby, his silence a comfort more powerful than words. Sonny had spent a lifetime projecting strength, shielding those he loved with fierce loyalty and relentless power. But at night, that armor cracked just enough for vulnerability to slip through. He spoke slowly, his voice low and uncertain, admitting how deeply unsettled he felt. Not by business threats or rival families, but by something far more personal. Michael. The return of Michael to Port Charles Howard have brought relief, even joy, but instead it unearthed a storm Sonny hadn't anticipated. His son had come back physically intact, yet emotionally afraid, caught in the middle of a brutal custody war and scarred by betrayals that no father could easily fix. Sunonya admitted he had never seen Michael look so hollow, so detached, as if the years away and the ongoing court battles had drained something vital from him. The concern in Sonny's voice trembled under surface. Not just for Michael's mental well-being, but for his health. An unspoken fear that perhaps the trauma might leave marks deeper than any eye could see. Jason listened without interruption, his presence wavering, absorbing Sonny's pain with same loyalty that had anchored them through decades of hardship. He knew better than to offer hollow reassurances. Instead, he reminded Sonny of Michael's reasons, of the boy who had grown into a man shaped by loss but never broken by it. Jason pointed out how, despite everything, Michael was still fighting for his children, for his truth, for a future he believed in. That kind of strength didn't vanish overnight. And while the path ahead was raw, Jason reminded Sonny that Michael Weston walking it alone. Not as long as they were there to support him. Sonny nodded. But the worry didn't leave high sighs. He spoke about his own doubts. The creeping guilt that maybe he hadn't done enough, hadn't protected Michael from the psychological shrapnel off family's house. He confessed to sleepless nights, wondering whether Michael still trusted him at all, or whether the choices Sonny had made in the past had permanently something between them. It wasn't just about custody or courtroom outcomes. It was about the soul of a family slowly fraying at the seams. And for a man who had built his empire on control, Sonny now faced the unbearable truth that some battles couldn't be won by force or strategy, only by humility and time. In those quiet minutes, with no need for promises or declarations, Jason simply stayed by Sonny's side. The room was filled with silence of shared understanding, of decades of brotherhood forged in fire and loss. Sonny finally set the bourbon down, never taking a sip, as if the act of unburdening himself had sobered him more than the alcohol ever could. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, what Michael would decide, how the custody fight would unfold, or whether their bond could survive the storm. Beyond that moment, with Jason's steady presence grounding him, Sonny felt a flicker of clarity. He wasn't alone in his fear. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to take the next step forward. Fourth, the late afternoon sun filtered dimly through the blinds of Volix's office, casting long, uneven shadows across the polished wood of her desk. She had just finished reviewing Ellie Gale brief when Rick entered unannounced, his expression unreadable, but his presence undeniably churred. Alexis barely had time to look up before he closed the door behind him with a definitive click, sealing the Minto, a space that until now had a wise being, a sanctuary of reason and professionalism. But there was nothing professional in Rick's tone when, hellened across her desk, voice low, demanding, and unmistakably threatening, he wanted more money. This time not for any legitimate legal cause, but to fund whatever reckless plans he and Ava were plotting in the shadows of Port Charles. The request, or rather the command, was absurd, outrageous, and Alexis knew it. She refused him fleetly, her voice steady, her eyes blazing with disbelief and growing fear. Rick's demeanor shifted in an instant. Shedding the mask of calculated charm that had once made him such a persuasive figure in courtrooms and political circles. What remained was something cold, entitled, and dangerous. He accused Alexis of betrayal of playing moral games when she owed him far more than she dared to admit. Alexis stood her ground, insisting she wouldn't be blackmailed, manipulated, or turned into a financial field for his corrupt ambitions. But before she could reach for her phone or raise her voice, Rick moved swiftly, stepping around the desk and cornering her between the wall and a filing cabinet. His voice turned to venom, his movements laced with control, not desperation. He wasn't begging to know more. He was taking. Alexis, caught off guard, tried to push past him, but Rick grabbed her arm tightly, his grip bruising, his eyes locked with a predatory intensity that sent a bolt offenick down her spine. There was no mistaking his intentions now. He wasn't just coercing her financially, he was asserting total demands, using fear and physicality to reclaim power she had stripped from him with Harusel. Alexis, ever the fighter, refused to cower. She tried to shout, but Rick covered her mouth, pressing her back with the force of years of buried resentment and toxic entitlement. Her mind raced, every instinct sharpened by fear and defiance. She twisted, kicked, anything to break free, but Rick held fast, his breathing shallow, his grip fueled by fury. For a chilling moment, the woman Woe had stood against so many in court. Akua had fought addiction, grief, and heartbreak, found herself powerless against a man she had honestly trusted. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound. This wasn't just violence. It wasted collapse of any illusion that Rick Lansing had changed. Eventually, through sheer force of will, Alexis managed to shove him off balance enough to stagger toward her phone. Rick backed away just in time to avoid being recorded, his face transforming once again, this time from ridge to something more calculating. He muttered a threat under his breath. Something about this not being over, about her owing him marathon, she understood. And then he vanished as quickly as he had come. Left alone, Alexis stood trembling in through a cage of her composure, her heart pounding with the weight of what had nearly happened. The bruises on her arm were already forming, but it was the scars on her trust that would take longer to heal. She knew Shackleton let it end like this. Rick hadn't just crossed a line, he had obliterated it, and Alexis, though shaken, would make sure he answered for it. Finally, the confrontation erupted with a sudden intensity that shook the calm of the campus courtyard where Jocelyn had been cornered by two older students known for their cruel rumors and manipulate Sivajip. Their voices rose, laced with venom, circling around her like vultures drawn to vulnerability. Jocelyn stood frozen, her back pressed against the stone wall, trying to shield herself, not just from their words, but from the suffocating prayer of being misunderstood, undeceilated. They taunted her about her ascent decisions, about things they could never truly understand, but wielded like weapons anyway. Her hands trembled slightly. Her lips parted as if to protest, but the weight of it all rendered her silent. And then, like a sodden gust of wind breaking a storm, Trina appeared. Without hesitation, Trina stepped between Jocelyn and her accusers. Her stance firm and unapologetic. Her eyes burned with righteous fury. Not the kind that lashes out blindly, but the kind that emerges from a deep well of loyalty and moral clarity. She didn't yell. She didn't have to. The authority in her presence alone was enough to shift the energy. Trina called out their cruelty with pinpoint accuracy, dismantling each insult with cutting truths and unwavering confidence. She reminded them of Jocelyn's strength, her integrity, and the fact that true power never came from tearing others down, but from lifting them up. Her voice never wavered, even as the aggressors tried to dismiss her, but they soon realized Trina wasn't bluffing. She was a force they hadn't prepared for. When one of the girls strived to push past her to get to Jocelyn again, Trina stepped forward, her boda physically blocking the path. Her glare was sharp, protective, and unrelenting. This was no longer a social spat. It was a line in the sand. Trina made it crystal clear that anyone who dared touch or harm Jocelyn wouldn't swear to her first. The tension crackled in the air, but within moments, the bullies, realizing they had lost both control and their audience, retreated with sullen glares. Their power deflated by the sheer conviction Trina carried in her voice and posture. Silence followed their departure, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with relief, all in an unspoken bond that had just deepened. Jocelyn looked at Trina, her eyes shimmering with unspoken gratitude and emotional overload. She didn't have to say anything. Trina already knew. The kind of protection she had offered was just physical. It was emotional, spiritual. It reminded Jocelyn that she was on alone. That no matter how cruel the world might seem, someone saw her, really saw her, and would stand by her side, even when things got ugly. Trina reached out, gently took Jocelyn's hand, and gave it a reassuring squeeze. In that moment, no one else mattered. There was only the unbreakable friendship between them, forged through shared pain and unwavering support. As they walked away together, the sun began to break through the clouds overhead, casting long shadows behind them, but light ahead. Jocelyn had found her voice again, not because she shouted, but because someone else had stood firm when she couldn't. And Trina, fierce and radiant, had proven once more that true strength lies not just in fighting your own battles, but in standing for the Soe. Love when the world tries to silence you. What a whirlwind of emotion, betrayal, and bombshell revelations. Monday's episode promises to change the lives of Port Charles residents forever. Will Michael recover from Sasha's revelation? Will Nina's secrets destroy her credibility? And is this really the end for Curtis and Portia? One thing's for sure, General Hospital is just getting started. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to GH Updates for your daily dose of drama. We'll be right here, bringing you every twist, every turn, and every unforgettable moment. Until next time, stay tuned, Port Charles fans.